So you tell a story. The story of what? Andres
Drunk
Bonifacio.
history. This is drunk history.
No, it's not.
Is
You can't say the name.
yeah. You can. They're not gonna sue us.
This is the story of what?
This is
Andres Bonifacio.
total intoxication.
Andres Bonifacio and
Bonifacio
No.
brothers being murdered.
Juan Nakpil and Procopio and Bonifacio and Gregoria de Jesus. Gregoria de Jesus was who?
Obviously, the wife of the Supremo Andres. Then became widow after he was murdered. Well, supposedly tried and executed.
There were
but
two guys.
they call it
They named the
murder.
two guys who were sent to kill Bonifacio.
That
Who
was
were the two guys?
the commanding officer was Macapagal, Major Macapagal, and the two guys.
Bonzon and Pua.
Those are the ones who did it. But the commanding officer was Macapagal. Macapagal.
Anyway, what's the story? Where do you begin?
We begin in the we begin. The thing said that the blog said that, well, the blogger wrote that the idea was to really form a government ever since the Katipunan was formed. So they were supposed to form a government with, united two forces, the two factions, the Magdalo and the Magdiwang faction. But like how it turned out in our country, there's always two factions, and then everybody goes with the asshole.
We've always had factions.
But we always go with the asshole. So the one faction went for Aguinaldo, and of course one faction went for Bonifacio. And then during the Tejeros Convention, Aguinaldo already declared the leader, but Bonifacio is supposed to be the Ministry of the Interior, which is like, DILG right now. And Matapobre, Daniel Tirona, who are descended from Tironas watching this video, you are descended from Matapobre. Matapobre said Bonifacio cannot be Ministry of the Interior, obviously because, again, lahat sila burgis or rich elite Pinoys. And of course, Bonifacio was a working class dude, even though he's educated. So, of course, that did not sit well with the Sagittarius, November Sagittarius, Scorpio, Bonifacio. So he said, fuck this shit. And then because Tirona declared the proceedings completely, null and void, which probably was the plan from the whole beginning, I'm imagining. That was the plan from the whole beginning, maybe to bait Bonifacio, maybe, I don't know. So Bonifacio says, fuck this shit, and tries to form his own government in Naik, Cavite. And of course, because of that, they use that pretext to, obviously, on paper, it looks like it's illegal, but hey, after what we know now, what we know about history, who would you rather have, Aguinaldo or Bonifacio? Obviously, it should have been Bonifacio. So, they use that, so he forms his own government in Naik, but then, of course, they arrest him, and him and his brother, poor Procopio, always like the sidearm dude. Maybe we should make a film called Procopio, because it's always about Andres, so it should be from the point of view of Procopio, because that poor bastard got, arrested along with Bonifacio, and then, of course, they're tried just in less than 2 days, 1 day, 2 days, 1 day, and then sentenced the next day, and then, okay, we're going to kill you, and then they were brought to Maragondon, which is further along, like the furthest, that's at the furthest point of Cavite, one of the furthest points of Cavite.
It's pretty far.
Along the sea already, by the sea. And then, of course, Major Macapagal was the commanding officer, but Evie mentioned the two guys who killed Bonifacio, and not just killed Bonifacio, but also raped Gregoria de Jesus.
Gregoria de Jesus was the keeper of the documents. She helped sew the flag, one of the three who sewed the flag. And she was also a good marksman and horse rider, so she was also a soldier. So she did a lot. So of course but they didn't kill her. One guy just raped her in her own house.
Which guy was it?
I think it was the Bonzon guy.
Who's descended here from Bonzon? You're descended from a rapist.
You have to check his spelling of his name. I can't remember the whole name.
Well, what were the names again?
Parang Pawa and Bonzon.
So if those names are still existing, you're descended from rapists.
Parang hindi na sila masyadong common yung names. Actually, they're not common
from
last names.
From the rape, you're descendant from the rapist of the Lakambini of the Katipunan.
She was really, she would really do a lot. She wasn't just keeper of the documents.
Yes.
Or sewer of the flag. She did a lot. I mean, she really had skills, though. So, yeah.
In other words, she's not just a supportive wife.
Yeah.
Unlike how women are portrayed in Hollywood.
Yeah.
She's not just a supportive wife who listens to Bonifacio rant about his shit. Obviously, she could take care of herself.
But the funny thing is, usually, the rapes happen if you're going to either kill the person off already, but they just wanted to do that to emasculate Bonifacio, obviously.
Maybe
that's why the Ukrainian women are getting raped, because it's like a form of power lang, diba? Parang to be able to say psychologically, I can do whatever I want.
Well, probably adopted from the Spaniards, and maybe then later on the Americans, and later on the Philippine military.
Because actually,
when they would deal with subversives.
Remember, walang rape sa indigenous Pinoy communities.
Certain, not all. The one they were talking about was rape sa Bontoc.
Walang, it's not really in the culture, so that came from
Spaniards.
The Spanish
Most
culture.
likely, the goddamn Catholics.
It didn't really exist in like the pre-Hispanic villages.
Unpracticing Catholics and the Christians who support murderers.
Because remember, women in the Philippines used to walk around without their shirts. They could even walk around in just a skirt.
Topless.
It's only when the Spanish arrived they had to like wear.
There's no, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
Men can walk around without shirts, so why not?
But
women?
in Asia Pacific communities, they really didn't. In the early postcards, pictures of early Filipino women.
Yeah.
They would take pictures and they weren't wearing any top, and it's hot in the Philippines, so you can understand.
So of course they were labeled heathens.
So all this, So anyway,
Christian.
Gregoria de Jesus. She was and after Andres Bonifacio was executed after the kangaroo court, and they said she was raped, and then after that you don't hear much about her except that the interesting thing is Juan Nakpil was the best friend.
Bestie of Bonifacio, right hand man.
The bestie of Bonifacio. Bestie of Bonifacio is mourning. And then Gregoria de Jesus, the widow, is mourning. Naturally, they find solace in each other and they end up together. I mean, you gotta understand that. They end up together because they're both, I don't know, it's weird, right? Like the best friend of your husband. But anyway, and then they end up together and they have, 6 children? And you don't hear much about her after that. She has a quiet life, but I'm sure she had post-traumatic stress after that. Nobody talked about it, but I'm sure she had. And she just lives a quiet life for the next how many decades until 1943 when she died, when the Japanese were around or something. But she just had, 6 kids and was a very good cook. And you never heard a peep out of her anymore after that.
Obviously traumatized.
But back in the day, the grandchild would talk about Nakpil and say, they can't imagine that this guy was a revolutionary. He's just very quiet. Like, they would look at their grandparents and didn't think about it that way.
Of course, because you never look beyond what you see.
They don't talk about it. Like, the grandfather of my friend never talked about the death march. That was the generation, those grandparents. They don't talk about they'd rather not talk about what they saw or what happened. They just want to move on. And sila yung magaling mag-move on. Then they just didn't talk about it because nobody talked about those things.
Well, before. Gen X is the last generation that didn't really talk so much about it. Then the millennials and Gen Z now talk about everything.
Even things that maybe they shouldn't.
So it's quite telling, of course. I think if you count, I just had a thought. Outside of Cavite, how many monuments does Aguinaldo have?
I don't know.
Bonifacio guy, I think a lot of monuments outside of Cavite, aside from the place where he was murdered.
He got the whole fort named after him.
Which they turned into a mall.
No, not a mall.
They turned it into a commercial center. So even in death and in life, Bonifacio is betrayed for capitalism, for American capitalism.
He would be so pissed.
In death and in life, you're like, what the hell? You named me a fort after me and you make it a freaking
Remember,
mall?
Bonifacio was the warehouse clerk. When he was trying to court Gregoria de Jesus, who was about 18 and he was 20-something, because they kept having meetings in her house, and then he liked her pala. And she was middle class, and he was not.
Yeah, he was working class.
He was a warehouse clerk, and she was more of the middle class girl in Caloocan. And then he would hang out with her parents and her. And then eventually she did marry him. How come? How did the father finally allow her to...
I don't know. I didn't read that. You read that probably.
And then, yeah, and then, so Bonifacio was the guy she was really with, and then, but they had a kid, but the kid died of
smallpox. Sadly.
So there are no Bonifacio descendants because the child died of smallpox.
No direct Bonifacio, aside maybe from his sisters. Maybe?
I don't know.
Or he had sisters or brothers.
We don't even know about that part.
Aside from Procopio.
So, what do you call it? The baby died, so they didn't have any kids. So she did have 6 children with Nakpil, the bestie, later on. So maybe that was, that was it. They just had to move forward, and they got married, and they had 6 kids. And I guess you could understand after you read the history why they got together. It would be them who would get together.
So again, we didn't start out well, as Eve and I discussed. When the nation starts out that way, the guy is supposed to go with.
We didn't get off on the right foot with a country as a country, because there was already a betrayal. It started with a betrayal.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this, that it started with a betrayal, and sadly, there's still like factions up to now, Magdalo, Magdiwang, this and that, everywhere, even in the left, they have factions, the right, they have factions.
Even with this new government, they have factions.
So, we've always been divided, and we've always had we didn't start off on the right foot. We started off on the wrong foot with a betrayal and an assassination and a kangaroo.
Bonifacio the first desaparecido.
And the mother of the revolution, the keeper of the documents, was raped in her own home. The way they probably thought, well, he's dead, so and it was like a revenge thing.
Well, because they had also arrested Gregoria, aside from the brother.
Maybe that was part of the torture to get the documents, no? But
maybe. And sadly, you know where Rizal's bones are, but we don't know where Bonifacio's bones are. That's the sad part.
But I really like this history of the Nakpil and Bautista clan, because they have an inventor of cholera
medicine, an architect, a composer. They're very good. They're really a rich family. I mean, rich in terms of intelligence. I said rich in terms of intelligence, contribution to society,
talent.
scientists, intellectuals, artists.
Because when you say from a good family now, it means rich. That was what I meant by from a good family.
Yes.
That one, they're real heroes. They're descended from real heroes, people who really stuck their necks out during the revolution. Like your grandmother was raped by the traitors, and your grandfather was a revolutionary, the bestie of... Wow, your grandfather was the best friend of Bonifacio.
The bubui.
The best friend of Bonifacio. But he was actually a musician.
There you go.
So there
you go. So Julio Nakpil had trauma, most likely from fighting and killing people.
And obviously Oriang
had from getting raped by those sons of bitches.
Gregoria was called Oriang, right?
Yeah, she's Oriang. Gregoria de Jesus is Oriang. That's her nickname.
So I think it would be so cool if you could go to the Nakpil house in, where is that place? And visit it one day, and be able to meet the descendant who's in charge.
And also go to the Maragondon monument for Bonifacio and Procopio.
On a field trip. Maybe those are the field trips people should arrange. The one to Maragondon and to those, the ones with people who are real heroes.
We don't know enough. Frankly, like I said, the teaching is not correct, because she had a good history teacher in high school. I didn't really. Not really that. If it's not taught well, then the kids won't really have any interest or any connection to it. And of course,
well, history should be taught through theater and film and other things like that.
Knowing what we know now, we don't know history enough. So, like Evie said, we began
on
badly.
The wrong foot. Yeah, because you started with a betrayal. It's not
betrayal, and then you started doing the torture tactics and rape tactics against the subversive, the enemy. So,
Yeah, because during Marcos times they did that, right?
and we always get hijacked by another foreign power. In between two foreign powers, always. First the Spaniards and the U.S., and then from then on, here we go. It keeps moving.
There have
moving.
always been traitors, not like
Now China.
at least if you look at Ukraine, they're solid. Wala masyadong yung mga traitor, di ba?
Oh yeah, we got a lot of traitors
Yung
here.
problema sa atin, financially pa lang may traitors na, di ba? So,
Got a lot of traitors, man.
so there, it's 15 minutes, all right.
That's intoxicated history. The murder of the Bonifacio brothers, the rape of Gregoria de Jesus, and
But
the
she
Nakpil.
shouldn't just be known for that. She should be known
course.
for being the mother of the revolution.
Yeah, that too.
She
Mother
was.
Revolution.
Because they might think you keep emphasizing that you don't want her to be known for just being raped.
Fine. Great lady, but got raped, and then had a nice, quiet life and family, but was traumatized. The grandniece writes about it like it's not, she didn't know. She didn't know, probably. Of course, Lola's not going to talk about that.
That's why she became a good cook. Probably that was her therapy.
Yeah, but that's why you have to. So again, all the kids, you gotta wonder why your grandparents are very quiet.
Yeah.
There are reasons.
If they're very quiet, that means they just don't want to talk about something.
They went through shit.
They
So don't
probably
judge your
did.
grandparents.
Yeah, your grandparents probably went through a lot. Like my grandfather went through, but on death march. But he died when I was like 3 or 4, so never really got to really talk actually. So.
Yeah, just because you didn't know about it, doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Because back in the day, when something traumatic happened, people just didn't talk about it. They did not talk about it, especially yung mga grandparents, great-grandparents. No, they didn't. They
No.
really didn't talk about it.
No.
There was no such thing as going to therapy and talking about your feelings. No way. They would say kalokohan, then you pay 1,000 an hour. Kalokohan, my lola would say that probably.
Even though they needed it, probably.
But they actually needed
They
it.
needed it.
Yeah.
We need therapy. This country needs therapy.
Or else you keep voting for the wrong people.
Just like Aguinaldo.
No. Okay. Okay na yan? How do you stop?
That's okay.